some housekeeping here. I'm Dan Boren. I'm the community planner for the city of Springboro. And just going to go over a few introductory slides, and then we'll turn it loose on our program tonight. I want to thank you and also our colleagues at the Springboro Public Library for partnering on this program with us, as well as Joe and this team from the Miami Valley Cable Communications Council. This session is being recorded for rebroadcast on the city's website and channel 6, I think, here in Springboro, and also through our YouTube channel. So asking you to turn off all your devices at this time, and including me. Yep. And so that way the recording will go off well. And these are just so that the recorder also picks this up. These aren't to amplify, just so that the sound picks this up. I think Lynn did a very good job of what BPAC is, but it's been around since 2009. It's trying to make our community both bicycle and pedestrian friendly. For those of you who live in Springboro, you're more than welcome to come to our meetings, which are on the 4th Monday of each month. The next meeting is on the 28th. So we sponsor rides, events like this, and more. So we appreciate those who've come from Springboro and afar for tonight's program. We have one more event as part of this series. You're all welcome to come. We're not going to have seating. We're going to have seating on the perimeter. And we're going to have our biannual, I think we've had them 2 years ago, visit from Autobahn from Spoken Bikes in Middletown. And great program, bring your wheel, and we're going to have the room all open, and we're going to focus on just the bikes being repaired. So if you have a bike, bring it here, or bring your wheel. He will go through a program of teaching you and showing you how to maintain and repair your bike, basic bike maintenance as we approach the new year and the new cycling season. And again, I'm Dan Boron. This is the way to reach me. We do have a sign-up sheet out there on the table. If you want to get more information about all of our programming and events and whatnot, just join that sign-up sheet, and we have plenty of items for you to take, please, so feel free to visit the table on the way out. I'm going to now turn it over to my partner, Nan Allen, from the Springboro Public Library.
Hi, this evening's program is about hiking the Camino de Santiago, which is a network of pilgrimages in Spain and France that lead to the shrine of the Apostle St. James the Great. Our presenter is Dr. Joslyn Hardman. She is a lecturer in Spanish and Portuguese at The Ohio State University and has hiked extensively in Europe, South America, and the United States. She will discuss the rich history of the Camino de Santiago, cultural artifacts it has inspired, as well as how to train, plan, and pack for it. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Joslyn Hardman.
Hi, sorry, I'm going to go ahead and take this off so it doesn't interfere with the mic as well. So when we are all able to travel as extensively as we used to enjoy doing, I just really wanted to take the opportunity to recommend this pilgrimage. It's so accessible for any age. I ran into both children and grandparents walking this pilgrimage. So this is one of the differences between the Camino de Santiago and other through hikes, is it is challenging just to walk as far as you need to walk, but there's no time frame, right? You can start whenever you get up in the morning and go through till you're tired and stop. So that's the lovely thing. As Nan mentioned, this is the end point. It's named for the end point on the pilgrimage, the Santiago de Compostela. And it's this gorgeous cathedral in Santiago, so you can go and visit it. And they always have a celebration for pilgrims at the end, which is really lovely. So it's hosting the tomb of St. James, either named the Elder or the Greater, and St. James in Spanish is Diego, and so combined with Saint, San Diego, Santiago, right? So we have the legend of St. James, who was martyred in Jerusalem and then brought back to Spain, and so the tomb there has his remains, and also because he was sainted. Miracles have purported to have happened there with healing, and so pilgrims go, or used to go, it's over 1,000 years old now, to find healing. So here's a little bit of, oh shoot, it doesn't show the map. Coming up next, you will see a map with all of the different, I'll just go ahead and put up all the different routes. So when they say Santiago or Camino de Santiago, it just means that it's one of these routes that ends up in Santiago. So you can start in Jerusalem if you want and end up in Santiago. When we were living in Denmark, there were pilgrims coming from St. Olaf's Trail up in Scandinavia down to Spain. So the traditional route, the one that I'm going to talk about, is the one that starts at Saint-Pierre-de-Port in, you can see the green trail there that starts in France on the French side of the Pyrenees. So this is old, as I mentioned. These pilgrimages began in the 10th to the 12th centuries. And the difference between the Camino Francés or the Napoleonic Trail is that it's the oldest one. So it just means that there are a lot more amenities that have been developed along the trail. So also, in contrast to other through hikes, you really don't have to have very much in your pack because you can stop at cafes along the route, stop at restaurants. There's a very extensive network of hostels or albergues that are either funded by the municipalities themselves or are privately run, but they cost anywhere from 3 to 4 euros a night to all the way up to 12 when you get closer to Santiago. So extremely affordable. I was recommended a guidebook. Pilgrim's Guide is the very first guidebook that was developed. And really, I did a combination of different guidebooks. So you really can't go wrong. As long as you buy a SIM card for your phone, you will always be able to orient yourself on the path. The Spanish government puts out an excellent guidebook. That's the one that I started with, and then I found a couple of others that I combined with it. So when you start, wherever you start, if you go to any cathedral or church, you can pick up a pilgrim's passport. And if you get a stamp every day until you get to the last 100 kilometers, and then that's for certificate purposes. So then you have to get more stamps every day. But this at least certifies where you started on your trail. Since I started in April, I wanted to avoid the crowds that you find in July and August. And the year that I did it, 2017, it was actually a very mild spring. But at the same time, the pass over the Pyrenees was snowed in and closed. So I couldn't have started in France, even if I had wanted to. So I started in Pamplona because it was an easy place to arrive to. Okay, so it all depends on if you want certification or if it doesn't matter to you. So if you're getting certification, then you get the passport and you get the stamps. And then you show up at the office of pilgrims in Santiago and you turn in your paperwork. And there are a couple of different certificates that you can get. So the first is a certificate of distance. So if you walk at least 100 kilometers and you can verify it with multiple stamps per day, then you get a certificate of distance. There's also the Camino for bikers. And if you prefer to do it as a cycling trip, that's also completely acceptable. You do it for 200 kilometers if you want the certificate of distance. And then if you're doing the Camino as a pilgrimage for religious or spiritual purposes, then you can also request a Compostela. And you can see here what they look like. So one is gives the distance where I started, how far I walked. So for me, it was about 500 miles to walk from Pamplona. I went past Santiago. I went to Fisterra, which is about another 4 or 5 days walking past Santiago, but I wanted to reach the sea. I don't know, it just seemed very romantic at the time, and it was an amazing view coming out over the cliffs to see the bay and the marina at Fisterra as you come around along the walking path on the beach. So I highly recommend it if you want to even keep going past Santiago. But really, by the time I arrived in Santiago after, oh gosh, about 3.5, almost 4 weeks of walking, I didn't want to stop. So I just kept going. And I had 6 weeks before I had to leave. So I thought, well, let's just keep going. So how do you prepare? I trained 4 to 5 hours every other day. It worked well with a teaching schedule because I had classes, a couple of days a week that semester, so it was fine. The thing about going in the spring is there's a lot of rain. So I did get a rain poncho that I took with me. I thought that I had prepared well for the swelling in your feet that happened after walking 8 to 10 hours a day. But I really wasn't prepared, and I did end up having to get new boots after about 10 days on the trail. My feet swelled 2 sizes, and I had prepared for 1 size, but not 2. So that was a significant increase. So I usually wear a size 37 European, so that's like a 6.5 or 7. And I ended up at the end with size 39 boots, which are sitting right over there. So there are really nice places you can stop and get gear all along the way. Yes, question?
How important are the trekking poles?
For me, I had a knee that I had just the year before had arthroscopic surgery on. So the trekking poles for me were just about stability and support for that knee. But just a year post-op, and actually my other knee was complaining more than the knee that I'd had surgery on. So I thought the trekking poles were absolutely lifesavers. And more than going up the mountains, because you go, even in Pamplona, you're coming out of the foothills of the Pyrenees, but then you go up and over the Cantabria before you get to Santiago. And so it's just up and down the foothills and then the mountains. And for me, I just really appreciated having the trekking poles to stabilize myself as I was coming down more than going up, actually. I had a tiny little sleeping bag, and I had a fleece jacket and a down puffer jacket, which you can see over there. And I also had a sun hat because it would go, pendulum between really bright sun and pouring rain. So the recommendation is that you don't pack more than 10% of your body weight. And I thought, oh, that's just a guideline, surely. And so I had packed, actually I kept this, but my paper journal and my pen, and I had a book, which was ridiculous. I had a couple more changes of pants and shirts than I really ended up needing. So after my first week, I actually purged 15% of what I'd packed. And fortunately, there are post offices all along the way, and you can send your box to Santiago, to the post office in Santiago, and pick it up when you're done. So that's what I did, and it was a massive box. So what I ended up keeping were just 2 sets of clothes. So I would wash one at the end of the day and put on the other at night and sleep in my clothes and get up and leave, because they kick you out of the albergues pretty early, and you're packing in the dark usually. So it helps to have, just a little kit for your toiletries. I had soccer sandals because I could go shower in them, as well as keep my thick hiking socks on when I went to dinner in the evenings. and not have to put on my hiking boots until the next morning, and my poor feet were very grateful. And then I had just quick dry towel, which I actually ended up leaving behind at an albergue because I was packing in the dark in the morning. And the next albergue had lost and found with towels that had been left behind by other pilgrims. So you can really pick up things if you're missing things. And like many other pilgrims, I had trouble with blisters. I highly recommend petroleum jelly in between your toes because that's where I got blisters. I didn't get them in the usual places. And when they burst, you need, I used iodine or, oh, now I'm blanking on the name of it, but I just picked it up at a pharmacy there on the trail. So super cheap. Everybody knows that pilgrims are getting blisters and they have everything you need. So what did I splurge on in terms of weight or space? So I went ahead and got a 2-liter water bladder that fit into the top of my backpack. And then it had a drinking tube and a mouthpiece. And I found that I drank more consistently and stayed hydrated through the day rather than getting water bottles, although there were other pilgrims who would just pick up a water bottle every day. But the water is very potable, perfectly drinkable in Spain, so I just refilled at the albergue every morning before I left and had no trouble. I did bring my cell phone because that was my camera, and I had it in a Mophie case because it is actually more difficult than you would expect to find a free receptacle at the albergue to recharge your devices. So I did splurge on getting a Mophie case and an adapter with extra USB ports so that I could plug multiple devices in. And as I said, I kept my journal and my pen. I couldn't give them up. And I had my pilgrim's clamshell on the back of my backpack to indicate that I was on a pilgrimage. So why do this? Why would you do this? This is the first question that another pilgrim will ask you is, why are you here? What are you doing this for? And for me, it's the same answer that I would give for why do you travel? It's a way of stepping outside, not just of the sense of time and your daily obligations and who you need to show up for, but also just stepping out outside of life and entering into someone else's. And I love that sensation. And this citation really helped sort of encapsulate that sense. That I teach a lot of poetry. You'll see that at the end. And whenever we talk about poems about death, what we're really talking about is life. So you get this sense of, well, what is your life for? Why are you doing this? And it forces you to focus in on not just, sort of these flights of fancy that we have about trying to define what's important to us, but also grounding us in our bodies. That we're going to interpret these experiences through the physical, even when they're spiritual, emotional, mental. And so it forces you to live just at the level of your breath, because that's all you can hear in your ears as you're walking. There's a great deal of solitude, even though a lot of people are doing this pilgrimage, especially during the last 100 kilometers. But the vast majority of your time, you're entirely alone on a mountain, which I think is fantastic. But it depends, right, what you love. And so there is that sense of you get this incredible euphoria, this sense of being in your body but not being limited to it. And so I find that incredibly freeing. So there are a lot of different cultural artifacts, not just in Spain. And it's so funny, the way the Spaniards do the Camino. because for them it's their backyard. You know, they drop in, they drop out. They don't care. They don't get the certificate, they don't get the stamps, they don't bother with any of that, right? They have a week free, so they decide to, you know, start off from, when I was living in Barcelona, Montserrat has a starting point for the Camino. They just start from wherever they are and head down part of the path. And so there are all these different types of memorabilia that go along with those kinds of short and long-term pilgrimages. It tends to be the Europeans and the Americans that do the whole thing at once. But I'll talk about an exception to that later. So the lovely thing, and people say this all the time, the Camino provides, like when I lost my towel and found another one at the next stop. But as soon as you commit to doing it, things will open up. People will come into contact with you and give you some advice or a piece of equipment that you would never have known that you might have needed. This kind of thing. So I love this quote. It's sometimes attributed to another mountaineer, but this is the closest attribution that I could get in my research, William Hutchison Murray. The moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too, and a whole stream of events issue from the decision that you make at the moment that you make it. So I use Scott's Cheap Flights. It's a free subscription service, so they'll send you notifications of discounts and rebates on flights. And so I got this offer in my email for half price round-trip ticket to Spain, and I thought, you know, I could probably fit that in after teaching. And it's been a year since I had knee surgery. Let me take a look. And a friend gave me a guidebook because she had done the Camino, and then another friend who's a priest in Cincinnati, she said, oh, did you know there's a Dayton connection to the Camino? The Estevez family, they did that movie, The Way. And I thought, what? So I watched the movie The Way. And that was very helpful. There are certain archetypes, sort of a Wizard of Oz, yes, trope.
The Martin Sheen movie, is that in any way misleading?
Well, so I read an interview with, I think it was Emilio Estevez, his son, who directed it, and Martin Sheen acted in it. And so it is a yellow brick road, Wizard of Oz type of trope. So you have these archetypes who are walking. So in that sense, I think that the characters are simplified to those archetypes. But at the same time, the way that they talk about, you know, how painful it is. One of the women was talking about how she's just angry all the time. And I thought, you know, I mean, I wasn't angry all the time, but I did feel like there are these emotions that get harbored in the muscles, and that you're working your muscles so much every day that just all these, there's a great book called Unlamented Sorrow, that it just comes out. You work all of those emotions out of your muscles. So I think there's a truth to that, not necessarily that it has to be anger. Sometimes it's grief. But I do think those emotions get worked out as you're walking. And of course, they've dramatized, you know, the reason that the Martin Sheen character is walking is because of the death of the son. And there are definitely markers along the way that note pilgrims who have died. So there are some dangerous situations that arise depending on the time of year that we are walking. Okay, so even though English is definitely the language of the Camino, it is in Spain. So I think you do have that sense that, you know, people are more willing to talk about their own experiences when they're speaking in their native language. And so it's nice if you have any phrases or words that you know in Spanish, it is much appreciated. The Spanish are not particularly critical of second language users of their language in the way that the French are known for being. The Spaniards are just pretty excited if you have anything under your belt, so that's nice. As I said, for me, one of my favorite things is being alone. So being able to travel solo like that was tremendously freeing. And I think when you're traveling alone, you are more open to meeting new people than you would be if you were along the route with an established relationship. But both of them bring their own gifts, so it just depends on what you're up for. And of course, even if you're traveling with someone, you're gonna run into this community because they tend to be small towns that people stop at. And so there's a very small downtown, just a few limited cafes. And so you're going to get to talking and sharing food and drinks together, and you'll create a sense of fellowship or community. And people walk at different rates. So you'll meet people, you'll share a couple of evenings with them, and then they'll move on or something like that. So it's very open. So I thought I'd talk then about, well, you know, who are the other people who walk this Camino? And these are my exception. So this group of Irish retirees I met on the Camino, and they were actually traveling once a year, every year, and they would go for a week. And over 5 years, then they would walk the entire Camino. And I ran into them on year 4. So they were nearly done. So I got to get to know them a little bit. And what I loved is they serenaded me with "On the Banks of the Ohio," because that was the song that they knew. And I thought, you know, what better way than bonding over a 19th century murder ballad? You know, I mean, that's just wonderful. And they bought me my favorite drink on the Camino, which for me was lemon soda. It's just so fresh tasting. I don't know. It was just one of my favorite things about Spain. And you do get that sense of, you know, people are so open and so generous. It's like being in Christmas all the time on the Camino. And so I think you find this sense of shared community of, you know, these are my people, you know, that you run into. So there they are raising a glass. The Irish drink a lot more than I do. I also discovered that. But, you know, there's my little lemon soda on the corner. Another pair that I ended up spending at least the first half of my Camino mainly with was a mother-daughter pair from Catalonia. And what was fun to me was Spanish was all of our second language. So their first language was Catalan. They did not speak English. And mine is English, but my second language is Spanish. And so it was, it felt like we were speaking among equals, you know, that we had this lingua franca that we used, and it was Spanish. And they were really well prepared because they were locals, and they had done this multiple times before. So they shared their tea and snacks with me because I had not yet learned to pack well enough during the day. And one of the things that I noticed was, wow, you know, there are political differences in every country in the world, and you're going to stumble across them. So it was helpful for me to know that Catalonia was going through a period of conflict and wanting to secede from the Spanish state. And so we were traveling through Galicia, which is the northern part of Spain. And so whenever they revealed that they were Catalonians, there was always a reaction. And most of it was negative because a lot of Spaniards felt rejected by their desire to split off. And, you know, you just have to be aware that these conflicts are happening. And I try not to say anything offensive to anyone, but you're going to, you know, run into that. So For me, what I loved was that they knew things about the culture in each place that we stopped that I was not aware of. So as soon as Anna found out that I was a linguistics professor, she said, oh, okay, we have to do this side trip. And it is actually quite difficult to sightsee when you're on pilgrimage because you're just trying to survive. At the end of the day, all you want to do is shower, eat, and sleep. So this was a big deal to make a side trip up a mountain to a couple of monasteries in order to see the very first example of written Spanish. So I was so thrilled. So you can see, oof, maybe not. Oh, it's not going to show you. I don't seem to be able to. You can come back to it. No, it's not letting me. Sorry. Shoot. I had this beautiful photo of where we are. But in any case, you can see, yeah, it's linked in. It shows fine here. Yeah. So it shows.
Oh, is it a link to something?
Yeah, it's a link.
Can you right click?
Está bien. That's okay.
I'm not sure.
Está bien. Bueno, they're the monasteries of Uso and Suso. And so when you get to this, you can take a bus up a mountain and you get let into these monasteries and they will show you the codex, which are these massive sermons that were put together by the Latin priests at the time. And Latin was the language of the educated in the north, right? In the south, it was Arabic. But in the north, it was Latin. And the way that these Romance languages developed as vernaculars, right, was that they started as oral languages. And so what was so exciting about this is that you see this transition from Spanish, that the priests are writing between the lines of the Latin sermon and in the margins in the vernacular that their parishioners are speaking. So it's the very first evidence that we have that's documented of Spanish as a written rather than an oral language. And in the South, you'll see Spanish, the first time that Spanish shows up in writing, it's in Arabic letters. So it's at the end of poetry, and these little extra lines, they're called the harchas, and they're written in Arabic, but when you speak them aloud, it's the Spanish language. And so that's the first that we have in the south of Spain. So I thought, oh, this is amazing. So my Catalonian friends were able to share that. And so Ana, there's the mother, who is my age mate, and then her daughter, Alba. And Alba was an ancient art restorer for the Spanish government. So there is a lot of patrimony, cultural patrimony there in Spain that she is responsible for maintaining for the next generation, which is no easy feat with all the tourism. So also, for those of us with Celtic heritage, I was fascinated to run into the original Celtic villages. So the Celts originated on the continent and in Spain, and then they migrated to the British Isles. And so you'll see in Osebreiro, at the top of a mountain, right, this very Celtic village with the Celtic architecture. And fortunately, I ended up crossing paths with Rafael a couple of times. Rafael is a gaitero which means that he's a player of Spanish bagpipes. And the Galician term is gaite for the bagpipe. And so I don't know if this video will play, but you can hear it, hopefully. But anyway, so there's Rafael sharing his talents with us. He's actually a journalist, and his partner is German, and she's an architect. So they actually live in London, but he was back home to do the pilgrimage, and brought his bagpipes, of course, because you can't just travel the Galician Santiago or Camino without your bagpipes. Okay, and because I had lived in Denmark, we also ran into a group of Danes. There's a long tradition of Volkenskole, which is like folk school, or school for the people. So it's sort of a continuing education program. You can take classes through this system of school and teaching. In this particular case, they were bringing a group of disabled students, and so they were not only hiking up and over the Cantabria with us, they were pushing wheelchairs up the mountains. Which I mean, we would get together and have a coffee together and just stare at them. How is this possible? And they're like, oh, well, we're just taking them for a week, and then we'll go to Santiago and we'll come back and we'll start all over again with the next group. Okay, that's being in shape. I did not aspire to that. I also met a pair of Australian naval officers who were very secretive about their profession. So I did not find out that they were naval officers until the end of the Camino. They told everyone they were in human resources. They happened to be in human resources on a nuclear submarine, but they kept that very quiet. So they had a great system where they just walked alone. They had different rates that they were walking. I was also way slower than both of them, but we were going to the same places. So we would end up in the same place at the end of the day. They had already gotten there, showered, had a full bottle of wine by the time I showed up. But it was just lovely to switch to English at the end of the Camino. It was a very surreal experience to sort of switch back and forth between my languages. But it was lovely also because they cooked. And so I got homemade meals when I was with them, which was lovely. For me, it was so exciting to meet a Gallego poet. So this is another one of the regional dialects in Spain. And so I had been with some Catalan women, Catalan speakers, and then I met a poet who wrote and spoke and performed in Gallego, his native dialect. So I also have a video of him reading one of his original poems, but he also composed this poem that is found in the marina at Fisterra, which was an ode to the fishermen who died in the worst shipwreck that Fisterra had suffered in the modern period.
Literatura na Costa da Morte. Na Costa da Morte existe un conjunto de autores que formaron el batallón literario da Costa da Morte. Entre ellos el poeta fisterrán Alexandre Nerium, redero de profesión. Y este poema dice así: Cabaleiro do mar, fun cabaleiro dun castelo de estrelas desvalidas, entre cachóns de anémonas perdidas, entre cinzas que afloran no salseiro. Cabaleiro do mar fun cabaleiro na galera de mans esvaecidas, entre vaguas de sal esmorecidas, amarrado a mesana dun veleiro. Cabaleiro do mar, de pés mollados, entre alfanxes sombríos ondulados, de azagaia sutil e nacarada. Cabaleiro de soño e de serea, tumbado no debalo da marea, sen pavés, sen loriga e sen espada.
So here is Alexandra Nurien reciting one of his poems. So anyway, I use that in class when I'm talking about various dialects in Spanish, and it's absolutely beautiful. So fishing, still a very dangerous occupation. And here you can see this little photograph. The Irish Pilgrims, whom I introduced you to earlier, one of their members had died. She had not made it to the 5th year. And so they brought her with them and put her on the cross at the end. So I just thought that was beautiful. And there is the 0 marker. There's actually a 0. So it's not in Santiago, as you would expect at the end of the Camino de Santiago. It is out by the lighthouse in Fisterra. So there's also, quite fortunately, a cafe there that serves hot chocolate, because you'll be frozen by the time you make it out there. There was a practice at the end of the Camino that you take off your dirty, smelly, sweaty, gross clothes that you've been in for a month and a half to 2 months, and you burn them in a pyre at the end. There are actually smoldering embers at the end of that, and it's discouraged now that you burn your clothes, but I understand the impulse. You will not want to wear those clothes ever again. After a month and a half or 2 in them, it's really a relief to put them away when you get home. Oh. So I thought I'd finish up by talking about some of the Spanish poets that ended up occurring to me as I was walking miles and miles and miles. So one of my favorite poets actually is not known for the Camino. So Miguel Hernandez, he's one of the generation of 98. But so is Antonio Machado. Antonio Machado is sort of like the grandfather of that because he was also part of the generation of 27. He was still alive at that time, but it's, I think, emblematic of the Spanish Civil War that he's most known for fighting against his own brother in the Spanish Civil War. So anyway, these things happen with civil wars. And what I love about his poem is, and it's quoted all over the Camino. So different sections, stanzas will come out of it. So if you know the poem already, you'll recognize it when you see it in these towns that you come through. So, and sometimes it's used a bit facetiously. So at one convent that I stayed in, it's really cheap, by the way, if you stay in a convent or a monastery, super cheap. And it'll say, so above the convent was, "There is a way, you can stay here." So I thought, oh, okay, this is a reference to Machado's poem. So unless you know the poem, you'll miss the reference. So I thought, oh, well, I'll have to treat you to a reference to the poem. So in Spanish, it's caminante son tus huellas el camino y nada más. Caminante no hay camino. Se hace el camino al andar se hace el camino, y al volver la vista atrás se ve la senda que nunca se ha de volver a pisar. Caminante no hay camino, sino estelas en la mar. So I put the English translation up for you. The thing that you miss with translating is this this family, linguistic family of caminar, camino, caminante, right? A person who walks, a walk, a way. They're all the same root word in Spanish. So I love that they share that and play off of one another. And it also is very freeing, I think, when you are so focused just on your own steps and your own breath, that you do have this sensation of that there is no path. You only see it when you turn behind, and then you see where you've walked. And I love that idea that nothing is set in stone. Your life is not determined. You know, you're making it up as you go along. So another Machado poem that I refer to a lot is the poems to Guiomar, or Canciones a Guiomar. And one of the tropes, one of the themes in this one is this idea of continuing to travel, continuing to be open on the other side of grief, on the other side of intense pain. And if you've ever wrapped up blisters and put your hiking boots on over them, you understand pain can happen at any level, and that you have to continue to walk through it. And so I loved this idea of dreaming of the roads in the afternoon. So the hills are gilded, the green pines, the dusty oaks. I wonder where the road will go. I'm singing travelers otra vez, right? This idea of caminante, all down the path. The afternoon sun is fading. And in my heart, I used to have this spike of passion. This always reminds me of Santa Teresa's transverberación, right? The transverberation, where she has the epiphany, the ecstasy. So her heart is pierced by the arrow, and that's one of the signs of her sanctification, right? Is that this wound is found supposedly on her heart, right? To evidence that she was, that vision that she had was not just a vision, but it was physical. So I managed to rip it out, but now I no longer feel my heart. The whole field for a moment holds mute and in shadow, meditating. The wind soughs through the poplars by the river. The afternoon darkens. The road that snakes and faintly lightens becomes obscured and disappears. The singing becomes or turns to lament. Sharp golden spike, who can possibly feel you in my cleaved heart? So I think there's a rich cultural heritage to this Camino in Spain. So many artists and poets and authors have walked it, are aware of it, have written about it. And that's been further incorporated into the fabric of this pilgrimage in Spain in the present day that refer back to these poems and paintings. And like our Canterbury Tales, right? Doing a pilgrimage is an ancient practice. And so you're part of this history and this rich tradition when you set foot in Spain for this pilgrimage. And coming back, you have sort of a reverse culture shock. You'll find other people who have done the Camino. Everyone has a very different experience of what it was like and what it meant to them. But it's always fun to share those experiences and to find how different we experience the exact same path that people have been walking for over 1,000 years. So for me, I came away with a deep affection for my body and its service for carrying me. After surgery especially, I felt that I had lost my confidence in my physical abilities. And this was a renewal of that sensation that, oh, I can trust it to hold me and to carry me through. So that was lovely. And that I have limits, that I'm not going to walk as fast as the naval officers, although we may end up at the same place. But that's fine. I met another couple from Australia who rented their house out for 6 months, and they did the Camino in 6 months because that's what they had. I did it in a month and a half. There are plenty of others who do it in 2. you know, the Irish were coming in and out and doing a week at a time over a 5-year period. You can do it however you want to do it. So there are my references. And if you have any questions, you can always find me at OSU planning my next trip. Yes, question?
So would you recommend, I have two questions. Would you recommend starting just buying shoes that are 2 sizes too big? And my second question is, how long, you said you were training 4 hours a day, for how long?
Oh, so I trained for a month and a half before I left. And, but you know, Ohio hills are not quite the same as the Pyrenees and the Cantabria. So although I had trained, I still felt really winded being faced with actual mountains. But at least I had that basic foundation of fitness. So I felt like it took me a couple of weeks on the Camino to really feel like, okay, I'm all right. Like you know, you're really in pain that first week. But the second week, you know, you're starting to build those muscles, and I was fine after 2 weeks. I felt like I was, you know, bouncing out of bed, you know, lacing my boots up, throwing the backpack on, and just so excited to be going out every day. And everybody around you is doing it too. So I think that community is more powerful than willpower. So as your sense of strength or commitment maybe might want to fade, there are all these other pilgrims on the trail with you, and so that will also buoy you along. But yes, I would buy, so I'm talking European sizes. So I went from a 37 to a 39, but I comfortably wear my size 39s. I just have thick hiking socks. So I like the cushioning. For me, what hurt the most was the bottom of my feet. So I ended up getting inserts, and the cushioned inserts fit better in boots that were 2 sizes too big. And so I would say, yes, get sole inserts, get boots 2 European sizes larger. If you're going to be out there for longer than 2 weeks, that's when your feet swell, is during that first 2 weeks. Because, you know, I would hike 10 to 12 miles a day. I'm thinking in kilometers, but it translates to 10 to 12 miles a day. And it took me anywhere from an average of 8 hours to walk it, but I always stopped 3 times. So I had my second breakfast stop where I got a café con leche, or they have really amazing fresh squeezed orange juice, which was worth a stop. And then I had a lunch stop, and then I had a late afternoon stop. So I stop 3 times every day. Not everyone will do that, but for me that took usually 8 hours to get from point A to point B. And one night it took me 10 hours, and that was miserable. But I made it. Oh, sorry, I missed you. Yes, another question?
In the Pyrenees, what kind of elevation are you at?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I started in Pamplona. So it's in the foothills still, but it's not obviously up at the top of the Pyrenees. And I have heard that that first day out of France up and over the Pyrenees is brutal, even with the albergue stop somewhere over the top of the very peak. So it's just that albergue fills up really, really fast. And so on top of the fact that it was snowed closed for me, that you have to book that albergue stay well in advance to get a place. But if you're going up and over, then, you know, I would look up the elevation for those Pyrenees. But for me, it wasn't bad because I was starting on the Pamplona side. Most Spaniards just stay in Spain. They don't bother going over to France to come over the Pyrenees. Like, yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Did you make reservations ahead of time for all of the stops that you made?
I didn't, but I was in April, which is very low traffic. As soon as you hit June, July, August, they do recommend that you just book everything ahead. my issue was that I had, injuries that I needed to recover from, and so I stayed 2 days in one place just to, my Achilles were killing me. So it took me a couple of days of recovery. And so I would have lost my albergue, at the next place. There was one, so O Cebreiro with the Celtic village at the top is a very long day climbing up the mountain, and they do have porter services. So for €5, you can give someone your backpack at the albergue in the morning, and they will drop it off at an albergue for you at the next town. And even when I ended up staying somewhere else for a night, I didn't make it as far as I thought, that albergue held my bag for me. And so I showed up the next day, and it was still there waiting for me. So I only used that service once, and I took a lot of flack for doing it. But this is what I'm saying. The amenities are well developed along this path. So if you want to take advantage of the Irish had giant suitcases, so they were definitely using the porter services every single day of their week. And they're also retired, so they were not carrying anything more than a day pack with water and snacks in it, and that was it. And they were thrilled to be able to make it through a five-hour walk, and for them that was a huge accomplishment. That's all they wanted. Yeah.
2 questions for you. The first one, at any point during your walk, did you consider stopping? Did you try to talk yourself off?
He's laughing. That's my husband, because he remembers the emails. I was texting him like, oh my God, what was I thinking? After my first day, I couldn't move. I got to my albergue, and I just lay on my cot and just thought, what am I doing? I'm not in shape for this. I can't do this. And one full night's sleep, I didn't even go to dinner. I couldn't get up. Literally was in so much pain. I've never been in that much pain before. And I thought, I don't know if I can do this. And it took me 3 days to get past. I could stop now. It would be fine. I tried it. I didn't like it. But like I said, every morning when I woke up, I had energy again. And so that's why I ended up feeling so grateful to my body at the end of that. And I think, as we age, it's hard to feel super grateful for how incredibly strong and amazing your body is to show up for you every day. But I got that feeling back because I did get through those first 3 days where I just really didn't know if I could do it.
And my second question is, what percentage of your walk is actually on a road versus a path?
So most of it is on a path. As I got farther along, I'd say about 3/4 of the way when you get to a larger city. There aren't a whole lot of big cities. So Pamplona is one of the larger cities, obviously Santiago. There's another one in there that is escaping me. And then you're wending your way up a road, really. But that was the only time that I remember being on asphalt. Everything else is gravel or a mountain road. And
are they isolated from the roads themselves pretty far, or are they adjacent to the roads?
Yeah, they're usually pretty.
That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, and especially with the French route. So sometimes it shares roads, but like I said, usually just around a large city. If you're coming in or going out of a large city, you'll be walking along a road. And but even in a city where, I remember walking along forever and ever. It took forever to get out of the city. But they had you walking along this tree-lined path next to a ravine. So you have this beautiful view while you're walking out of the city. So I would say it's a very small percentage of it is on asphalt, on a road. And at the time I was there, I don't even remember being passed by cars. Again, April is not a huge high traffic month, and it might be worse in the summer in terms of traffic. But most of the time, I was walking completely alone along a mountain, down a valley, up a mountain, and or walking through pine forests, which were absolutely gorgeous, or at the end, then out by the sea. So coming in along the beach road, the beach boardwalk.
One more question, if you don't mind, is could you describe a little bit more of the sleeping arrangements? They're dorm-like, segregated. What about husbands and wives? Do they just go off in their own places? How's that?
So you have lots of choices, thank God. But I chose to do the albergue just because it felt like so much of the experience that people talk about. So that is it's all communal, one large room with a bunch of bunk beds. And someone is always snoring. So I got in the habit of wearing earplugs. And it was fine. And you know, I had my phone next to me to hear my alarm in the morning, but they usually throw on the lights and, you know, okay, everybody out, everybody out. Yeah, so if you're staying in an albergue, you're going to get that communal experience for better or for worse. But I met a man from the Netherlands who didn't want to do that experience, and so he would pay a little bit more for a private room, and even more for an ensuite if you wanted your private bathroom. In Santiago, I ended up staying in the monastery, the smaller monastery, which is just outside of the main historical center. And it was, I think, 14 euros for a private room, but a shared bathroom. And it was exquisite. Oh, I was so excited to have a private room. At the end, that was my big celebration in Santiago. I paid extra for a private room. But altogether, including the airfare, which was, like I said, half price, so about 400, 450 with taxes, for a month and a half, it cost me $1,200 because I paid between 4 and 14 euros a night for my hostel. Yeah.
So my wife and I signed up to walk Rosario on July 2nd.
Oh, yes.
And we actually signed the U-Tracks travel organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess you'd call it glamping because they're going to take our luggage.
Oh, that's beautiful.
But they are going to give us a roomy tonight for us.
Uh-huh.
I guess because this is the Jacobian year, instead of expecting the summer to be crazy about traffic, it's better off to go ahead and have your reserve because otherwise.
Yeah, and I would say any summer. If you're going in the summer, go ahead and reserve ahead. But yeah, because of the Jacobians anniversary, it's going to be insane. But, you know, I started in Pamplona, and by the time I got to Sarria, there was a notable uptick in the number of pilgrims participating. So even in an off year, you can see, you know, that last 100 kilometers is very serious for some people. Yeah, yeah. So you'll be meeting lots of people. Yeah.
You felt very safe traveling alone?
Yeah, completely safe. And I know, you know, every year there's a report of, you know, someone being mugged or something, but it's this anomaly. You know, it hits the papers because it's like, oh, this never happens. And especially the Latin Americans that I met on the Camino, they were like, you could never do this. Even in Chile, which I think is really safe, they're like, you wouldn't be able to leave your bag. You know, that's just not done. And so I think there is a higher level of safety along the Camino because the Spaniards are really respectful of the people who come in as pilgrims. And so, yes, I think it's even safer than the rest of Spain. And the rest of Spain is super safe. Some people come up out of Portugal, and I have heard that there is more petty larceny in Portugal coming out of Porto, for example. I mean, you can start in Lisbon, but it's pretty far. But the sea route coming up out of Portugal is so gorgeous. it could be worth it too. So just depending on how long you want to be there and where you want to start. But any of those routes, it's worth it. It's just so gorgeous, the landscape, and the people who go, it's just a great sense of community. Oh, that's it, I've gone over this is like being in class again. Ay, lo siento, se nos acabó la hora. Okay, so anyway, if you have any other questions, feel free to email me. I'd be happy to answer anything informally. And, buen camino.